All right, everybody, welcome back. You ready to dive deep?
Always ready to dive in.
Today, we're tackling deep work.
Oh, a classic.
It's by Cal Newport. It's been super influential, especially, I think, in the tech world.
Especially, yeah, for people who are trying to get stuff done.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be really interesting for our listeners because, well, let's be honest, who doesn't want to be more productive?
Right.
And especially, I was thinking, a lot of our listeners are really into things like learning new programming languages.
It's hard. It's a skill. It's something that takes time and effort, and that's what deep work is all about.
Exactly. So before we get too far, maybe just a quick kind of definition. What exactly is deep work?
So deep work is the ability to focus without distraction on a cognitively demanding task.
Okay, so like if I'm trying to learn Python,
Yes.
and I really need to sit down and understand this concept,
And you need to get rid of your phone, get rid of the internet, shut the door, tell people not to bug you, and just be like, I am going to understand this and I'm going to get it done.
right, like no multitasking, no like having 18 tabs open.
None of that.
So how is that different then from what he calls shallow work?
Shallow work is it's all that stuff that we do. We answer emails, we scroll, we go to meetings, we do all this stuff that we think is work, and it is technically work,
Right.
but it's not producing anything. It's not giving us any value. It's not moving the needle forward on whatever project we're working on.
So it's like the difference between, I don't know, like writing an actual program
Yes.
versus like responding to a tweet about it.
Exactly. Or debugging it. Right. Actually getting in the weeds and understanding how this thing works and how to fix it versus oh, I just push to production and hope for the best.
Okay, so deep work is divided into like 4 main rules.
Mm-hmm.
And rule number 1 is work deeply. So what does he mean, work deeply? It kind of seems self-explanatory, but I think he's got a whole system here.
He does. So one thing he says is we need rituals to help us get into deep work.
Okay.
So it's not just oh, I'm just going to go into this room and hope for the best.
Right.
It's what are the things that you do to signal to your brain, okay, this is deep work time. Maybe you have a special chair that you only sit in when you're coding. Maybe you have a specific playlist that you listen to that gets you in the mood to code. Maybe you put a sign on your door that says, do not disturb.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, actually putting up physical signals.
Yes, like a physical reminder.
That you're in this zone.
And then he also talks about these grand gestures, which I love. These are things that are so extreme they can't not put you in this zone.
Yeah, he talks about, I think, one professor who, to finish his book, rented a hotel room.
Yes.
For a month and just went there every day.
Sit it away.
To write. So, I mean, that's a pretty grand gesture.
Yeah. And he was not allowed to leave. He gave his key to the front desk so he wouldn't be tempted to go out.
Oh, wow.
He had to stay there.
So I guess for our listeners thinking about programming,
yeah,
what would be the equivalent? If you were going to do a grand gesture to get into deep work mode to learn, Python.
Maybe a weekend retreat.
Ooh, yeah.
Where you're just I'm going to this cabin in the woods.
Right.
I'm turning off my internet and I'm going to learn Python for 48 hours straight.
I love it.
Something like that.
Okay. That is fantastic. All right. So that's work deeply.
Rule number 1.
What's rule number 2?
Rule number 2 is embrace boredom.
Okay. This one I feel is harder.
It is hard because we're so conditioned to if we're bored for 2 seconds, we have to go on our phones.
Right. Or switch tasks.
Yes. But what he says is that we need to train our brains to be okay with boredom. Because when you think about it, if you're trying to learn a new skill like coding, you are going to be bored sometimes.
Right. You're going to get stuck.
You're going to get stuck. You're going to be I don't understand this.
You're going to want to go do something else.
You want to go do something else. But he's saying, no, sit with that boredom. Let your brain work on it.
It's almost like building a muscle, right? Like mental endurance.
Yes. Because if you constantly give in to the temptation to just switch to something else,
yeah,
you never actually get that deeper level of thinking and that deeper level of focus.
Right. You're just always on the surface.
Exactly.
So for a programmer, that might be, okay, I'm trying to figure out this line of code.
Right. And you're just I don't know what to do. And instead of Googling it immediately or going to Stack Overflow.
Right, exactly.
He's saying just sit there with your code, maybe go for a walk, but think about it and don't go immediately to that quick solution.
Okay, I love that. All right, rule number 3, quit social media.
Ooh. A spicy one.
I know. I'm a little nervous about
That's
this one.
saying.
But, okay, so what does he mean by that? Like, never go on Twitter again.
So he's not saying, like, never go on social media again. I mean, he kind of is.
Yeah.
But what he's saying is that, like, be more intentional about it. Like, don't just mindlessly scroll.
Right.
If you're gonna go on social media, it should be for a specific purpose.
So what would be some good ways to, I don't know, like, apply that to your life?
Well, he talks about the 80-20 rule. So figure out what's that 20% of your social media use that's actually giving you value.
Okay.
Like maybe you follow like some really great coding communities.
Okay.
And that's really helpful to you. Or you're having like these great discussions with other programmers, but then like the other 80% is just like, scrolling through memes.
Yeah, just noise.
Just noise, yeah. So cut out the noise
Yeah.
and just focus on that 20% that's giving you value.
Okay, so be intentional about it.
Be intentional.
I like it. Okay, so we've got 3 of the rules down. Work deeply, embrace boredom, quit social media. What's the 4th rule?
Rule number 4 is drain the shallows.
Drain the shallows. Okay, so like shallow work.
Yes.
Get rid of all that stuff.
All that stuff that's like taking up our mental energy and not giving us any real value.
Okay.
So think about it, like all those emails, all those meetings, all that like mindless scrolling that we do throughout the day, all that stuff is like draining our energy and preventing us from doing the deep work.
It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Exactly.
Okay, so how do we drain the shallows?
So he suggests like a couple of things. One is time boxing. So like actually scheduling in specific times for shallow work.
Oh, okay, so instead of it just like bleeding into every part of your day,
Exactly.
you're like, okay, from 2 to 3, I'm going to do email.
I'm going to do email, I'm going to do all my meetings, and then the rest of the day is for deep work.
Okay, I like that.
And then he also talks about setting very clear boundaries, like letting people know that when you're doing deep work, you're not available.
Right, so maybe like turning off your notifications or like putting up an away message.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And he also talks about this thing called the fixed schedule productivity system,
Okay.
which basically means you decide on a fixed time that you're going to finish work every day.
Oh, okay.
And then you work backwards from that. So, if you decide, okay, I'm done with work at 5 o'clock every day, then you have to get all your work done before 5 o'clock. And that forces you to be more intentional about your time.
That's really interesting because I think a lot of people, myself included, it's more like the work expands to fill the available time.
Exactly.
So if I know I'm going to work until midnight, I'll just keep working until midnight.
Exactly. And you're probably not going to be doing your best work at midnight.
Yeah, but if I know I need to be done by 5,
You used to be more efficient with your time.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got the 4 rules of deep work. He also talks about like these advanced strategies.
Yes.
So let's get into those. What are some of the things that we can do to like really level up our deep work game?
Okay. So one of the things he talks about is having like a really clear vision of the future.
Okay.
So it's not just about like, oh, I want to learn Python.
Well, there's got to be a reason.
It's like, why do you want to learn Python? Like, what are you going to do with that skill? What are you going to build?
So for our listeners, it's like, okay, I want to learn Python because I want to build a website
Yes.
that does X, Y, and Z.
That helps people do this.
Right.
Or I want to like build an app that solves this problem that I see in the world.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
It's not just about the skill in itself. It's like, what's the bigger purpose behind it?
Exactly. Because that's going to give you the motivation to actually stick with it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, what else? What are some other advanced strategies?
Another one he talks about is adopting a craftsman mindset.
Craftsman mindset.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So it's about like really focusing on the quality of the work that you're producing,
Okay.
like taking pride in your craft.
So in terms of programming, this would be like, I'm not just trying to like hack something together that works.
Exactly.
It's like, I want to write beautiful, elegant code.
You want it to be like a work of art.
I like it.
You want it to be something that you're proud of and something that like other people can look at and be like, wow, this is amazing code.
Okay, so craftsman mindset, have a vision. What else?
So he also talks about the different philosophies of deep work,
Oh,
like
yeah.
different approaches to doing it.
Yeah.
So he talks about like the monastic approach, the bimodal approach. There's like a rhythmic approach. There's a journalistic approach.
Okay, there's a lot of approaches.
Yeah, so there's no one size fits all. Like
Yeah.
everyone has to find what works for them.
Okay, so let's break down a couple of those. What's like the monastic approach?
So the monastic approach is basically like eliminating all distractions as much as possible.
Oh, okay.
Like really going into like a deep state of focus.
So like going to a monastery?
Well, not necessarily a monastery,
Oh.
but like creating that kind of environment for yourself.
So maybe like turning off your Wi-Fi.
Yes, turning off your phone.
Like really going off the grid.
Going off the grid.
Okay, so that's monastic. What about bimodal?
So bimodal is kind of like you have these like bursts of deep work.
Okay.
And then you have periods of like more normal life.
So it's like maybe you have like 2 days a week.
Yes.
Where you're just like heads down.
Heads down, deep work. And then the other days you're doing other things.
Okay, I like that. That sounds a little bit more manageable for most people.
Yeah, it's a little bit more realistic.
Okay, and then what was rhythmic?
Rhythmic is like you create a daily habit of deep work.
Okay.
So maybe like every morning from like 9 to 10.
It's deep work time.
It's deep work time.
Yeah, no matter what.
No matter what.
I like that. That sounds good.
It builds consistency.
Yeah. What about journalistic? That sounds interesting.
Journalistic is kind of like you fit in deep work whenever you can.
Oh.
So it's like, you have like 15 minutes here, 20 minutes there. You just squeeze it in whenever you can.
So like if I'm waiting for the bus, I can do some coding on my phone.
Yeah. Or like if you have like a lunch break.
Yeah.
You can like go to a coffee shop and do some coding.
Okay, I like that.
It's about being flexible.
Okay, so these are all great. I think the challenge for a lot of people is going to be like, okay, this sounds great in theory, but how do I actually put this into practice?
Right.
Like, what about all the distractions? What about like the feeling that I don't have enough time?
Yeah, those are real challenges.
So what do we do about that? All right, so how do we actually make this happen? Like in the real world, how do we actually apply these deep work principles?
So I think the first thing is to really think about your environment.
Okay.
Like, where are you doing your work?
Right.
Is it a place that's conducive to deep work?
Yeah, because if you're trying to learn Python and like the TV's on in the background, it's probably not the best.
Probably not.
So what would be like a better environment then?
So you want to like minimize distractions as much as possible. So like turn off your phone, turn off your notifications,
Yeah.
close all the tabs on your computer that you're not using. If you can, find a quiet space where you can work without being interrupted.
Okay, so like I've tried to do that, and it's amazing how often like I still find myself like reaching for my phone,
Yes.
even when it's like face down on the table.
It's like we're programmed to be distracted.
Right. It's like I almost don't even realize I'm doing it.
It's a habit.
So are there like strategies, do you think, for like breaking that habit?
Yeah. I mean, one thing is like awareness, right? Like just noticing when you're doing it and then like physically removing the temptation.
Okay.
Like put your phone in another room, give it to someone else and be like, don't give this back to me for an hour.
I like that. And what about like if you can't control the environment? Like let's say you were trying to code in a coffee shop or something.
Noise canceling headphones.
Oh yeah, I was going to say like are headphones okay?
Yes, they are a must.
Okay.
Like create that like sonic barrier between you and the outside world.
And like music or no music? White noise.
Whatever works for you. Some people like music, some people like white noise, some people like silence. Experiment and see what helps you focus best.
Okay, cool. So we've talked about distractions. What about time management? Like I think that's another thing that comes up a lot with our listeners is just this feeling that like I don't have enough time to do deep work.
Yeah.
Like, I've got kids, I've got a job, I've got, all these other things. So how do we fit deep work into our already busy lives?
So I think it's about like ruthless prioritization.
Okay.
Like really figuring out what's most important to you and then making sure that you're scheduling time for that.
So like for our programmer, if learning Python is like really important,
Yes.
then maybe that means like, I don't know, like watching an hour less of Netflix
Yeah.
or something like, what are some other things that we can cut out?
Well, I think like a good exercise is to like actually track your time for a week. Like really see where your time is going.
Yeah.
And then you might be surprised like how much time you're actually spending on things that are not that important.
Oh, like social media?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like mindlessly scrolling or, watching TV.
Yeah, I could probably cut back on that.
And then like once you've kind of identified those things that you can cut out,
Yeah.
then you can actually schedule in time for deep work.
Oh, okay. So like put it on your calendar.
Put it on your calendar, like treat it like an important meeting.
Oh, I love that. Okay, and this kind of goes back to the time boxing thing too.
Exactly.
Like you can actually schedule like, okay, from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. I'm doing deep work.
Yes.
No distractions.
And then the other thing too is to remember that deep work doesn't have to be like this huge chunk of time.
Okay.
Like it can be 30 minutes, it can be an hour.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes I get intimidated, like,
Mm.
oh, I need to have like 4 hours for
Yeah.
you. And then I just end up not doing it at all.
So start small, like start with 30 minutes and then gradually work your way up as you get more comfortable.
Okay. That's great advice. All right. So I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about the 4 rules of deep work. We've talked about some advanced strategies. We've talked about how to deal with distractions and time management.
It's a lot,
It is a lot.
but it is worth it.
It is worth it.
Yeah.
So I guess the final thought I would leave our listeners with is like, just start, right?
Yes.
Like pick one of these things that we talked about and just try it.
Experiment
See what works for you.
and be patient.
Yes, be patient. It's a process. It's not going to happen overnight. But if you stick with it, I really think that deep work can transform the way you work, the way you learn, and really the way you live. So thanks for joining us on this deep dive into deep work. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.